Well, welcome everyone. A bunch of you just listened to me talk nonstop for 2 days. I apologize, and we're gonna have another hour of it. But yeah, I wanted to cover AI. So specifically AI in the age of business buying and how I think it can potentially change diligence. So for some context, I've spent the last 9 months or so building out a separate AI operating system and teaching it to a couple hundred entrepreneurs and now to their teams as well. And so, I sort of modeled it with a couple of our own companies in-house and then sort of teaching others. I did this partially, originally it was my intention to use this to kind of do an AI first version of ACE for Acquira, and it kind of took a life of its own. So I'm going to be teaching a lot of the things that I've learned there and how it applies specifically to diligence and business buying. So we just finished up a workshop on Saturday, and this was the entire second day was really talking about AI and talking about growth and change management with AI. And I actually really do believe that this is a very rare window, in that this is probably the last time that we'll be able to buy businesses. At least the next 12 to 18 months probably represent the last time we'll be able to buy businesses while underwriting based on pre-AI workflows and pre-AI levels of output. So this is an interesting opportunity to be able to buy based on pre-AI outputs and then immediately input AI and see a very, very large improvement. So one thing that I'll mention over and over again here is that this post-close lift that is potential is just that. It's potential. I've seen it work now in multiple companies, but it should not change your underwriting in the sense that your underwriting should still be based on these pre-AI numbers and should not inflate your valuations. So quick agenda. I'm going to go over how AI changes value creation inside acquired businesses, so what that looks like post-close. And then on the diligence side, what we need to change to find that upside and avoid false confidence. Why smaller deals may become more interesting than they looked before is another interesting piece. What capability buyers need now. So for me, it's about setting up a business brain with AI. So we'll start here. So my opinion, the most credible acquisition thesis now starts with pricing the business based on previous performance, so pre-AI fundamentals, and internally modeling what can actually change in the business after close. Give some examples of that. So the biggest shift with AI is a cost collapse in any work that already is done on a computer. This is where I think AI has an immediate impact and it's very practical. So some examples of that is content creation. So the cost of creating content drops probably 10 to 15x, depending on the type of content you're looking at. That also matters even for local businesses because it means that they can produce a lot more customer-specific content without any staff. And so when I say customer-specific, we'll get into that, but you can make content tailored to zip codes if you want to. The other massive cost collapse is in distribution. So specifically emailing and texting more than anything. It can also be done in phone calls. But the combination of distribution and content there with AI is effectively personalized video. So creating personalized video for very, very specific customers and sending it out. I have found increases engagement of that content by as much as 10x, right? So what used to be maybe a 2% click rate turns into a 20% click rate. What used to be a 1% or 0.5% engagement rate, right? So resulting in a call scheduled or resulting in a dispatch maybe actually goes up to, somewhere close to like 7-8%. And then any admin work at all, whether that's process documentation, whether that's training creation, whether that's the creation of handbooks, it is all like incredibly compressed in terms of cost. What that means, well, we'll get to that in a bit, but what that means is that your OpEx will drop, but it's actually a combination of OpEx dropping and getting to the equivalent of sort of a management run business much faster, much sooner, but with less management. So for some context, what used to require specialists are now most of the time driven to just the operator, so just the acquisition entrepreneur and AI. As an example for what we used to do with ACE, we would have a people and culture integrator hire a people and culture person at the business, or help the AE hire that person, and then train that person, who would then build out all the people systems over typically the course of about 4 to 5 months. So what that looks like now is basically a collection of AI prompts building all the same things, with the AE directly building it, with no extra P&C person making 7 to 8K a month, and no P&C integrator being paid for, and that 4 months then compressing down to 1 month. So it being from a total sort of input of hours to get that same output, it's likely somewhere around 30 hours from the AE themselves to build what used to take 4 months, for a full-time integrator, probably another 15 to 30 hours for the AE, and probably another 15 to 30 hours for an integrator. When we bought businesses before and people used ACE, we had a fractional CFO for the first 4 months, just because running out of cash was the number one concern. I would say 90% of it, minus I guess the human component of talking someone through anxiety, is now handled by AI, by prompts, by financial systems that are set up immediately, and coded immediately. Before, we had a lead integrator, where a large portion of the job, not all the job, probably but a meaningful portion of the job was, I would consider, like being a project manager for a lot of the change management tasks and sort of ingredients you needed to put in place. And AI can now also replace all that by literally just shoving the same procedures that we created for ACE, into ChatGPT, right, or Claude. So just again, as a framework, if the work already happened before in a computer, AI can absorb a lot more of it than buyers assume. By the way, this will probably be about another 15 minutes or so for the presentation, and then I'm just going to open this up to questions, and as usual, we'll just go back and forth. I'm sure a lot of people have questions. So a lot of the previous ACE engagements, we would basically run usually 2 different leadership offsites. And it really wasn't until the second offsite that happened around the 4th month of acquisition, that we would even introduce the concept of process creation, and process ownership. And that would then kick off from there on what was typically a 12-month process to actually create all of the procedures in the business. We would always start with sort of downloading the seller's brain, because they're quickly departing, right? And then focus on, outside of that, some other key processes in the business, or key processes where we knew we needed to hire, or we knew people were departing the company. What's fascinating now is that again, AI can write all the processes. There's a bunch of YouTube videos with my name under it showing how that's done, if you guys want to look. But it can be done now, literally all the processes in your businesses can be done in a month. I personally, there's 2 ways to do this. One way is to have the business owner top down map all the processes. That's not, in my opinion, the best way. The better way is to go bottom up and have actually all the employees map all their processes. And so what we ended up doing is actually having a Teams program that we taught the Teams AI. So it had the nice side benefit of getting everyone extremely AI enabled and using AI constantly every day. But at the same time, created all of the processes that they used as a side effect, and create a bunch of other stuff too, all the people systems, etc. In addition, the AI can be used for accountability. This is something that I'm working on a lot more actively right now. So a lot of discipline in business is constrained by accountability and communication in accountability, not necessarily like a culture, but communication and accountability. Just things get abandoned, right? Agents, like very simple setups for agents um, to help fix the communication piece of it, right? Again, it's not going to fix a broken culture. It's not going to fix people who are lazy. It's not going to fix people who don't want to do the work. But I would say the majority of the time, that's not the reason. The reason is actually poor delegation from the owner, first and foremost, secondarily from managers. And a lot of that is not due to, is just due to a lack of systems and a lack of time, both of which AI solves. So AI can also expand demand and free up supply within these businesses in ways that you wouldn't expect, right? So obviously, if you buy an agency, right, or buy something that's entirely digital, you have much larger supply expansion. However, the risk of doing that, obviously, is that AI is hitting that industry as a whole. And so realistically, there's going to be a cost collapse everywhere. And you're going to have competitors who will collapse the cost of what used to be a $6K a month engagement to a $900 a month engagement, right? And that's probably not something you want to underwrite today, right? However, if you are buying a service business that is so most people who've owned service businesses understand that actually usually it's the supply side that's more difficult. A big part of solving, or the big part of winning on the service side, is your ability to manufacture a workforce, right? And so manufacture a workforce simply means, can I take an 18-year-old who's mechanically gifted off of the street, maybe doesn't have a license, right? But how quickly can I make them revenue generating and doing quality work? And that changes with every single industry, but that's usually the first question you need to ask. And the best businesses understand how to both train their employees, but also understand how to optimize the sequence of training and work in such a way that an employee becomes revenue generating quickly. Again, this is one of those things that you can work with AI and set up in the better part of a morning, and have a lot of those systems and training in place. Something that before would take literally months. On the demand side, again, text and email, right? Again, that cost collapse of content creation distribution is massive. You could do that with your own lists. You can do that with scraped lists, right? So being able to scrape, especially if you do B2B sales, right? And you want to do maintenance contracts, you want to do hydrojetting for restaurants, you want to talk to property managers, you want to talk to realtors, right? Being able to create custom videos in your outreach for everyone results in like literally 10+% reply rates. So it's like it's honestly, it's something you can turn on and then literally your phone just doesn't stop ringing. It's a matter of figuring out how to turn that into sales. Things like website creation, posting in Facebook groups, which is free marketing, right? The creation of I would call it internal software, right? So like internal CRM, having a GMB posting strategy and schedule, all those things are basically done for free now, right? The cost of your Claude Max account, to keep Claude Code running. even when we talk about even like commoditized products, so plumbing, you may think like, what can I actually do to send a video about plumbing? Well, you can talk about the work you did in the same HOA, the work you did 2 streets over, right? And literally create a video that might only be applicable for um, 400 or 500 houses, or 200 or 300 businesses, and it's because your cost of creation was like $1 or maybe $3 if you used HeyGen's Avatar 4 or something. It's 100% high ROI. On the supply side, so your ability to do more work, so get more output on the fulfillment side for less input. It's really on services, really mainly SDRs and dispatchers, right? You're obviously most of the time you have like the strength of these businesses is that you have people on site, doing manual work that need to know how to walk and use their fingers and use their eyes, which robotics isn't there yet. But on the service side, having maybe a 20% lift, maybe a 15 to 20% lift because you have a 2 to 3x lift on SDRs and dispatchers. Obviously, your ability to hire more people is useful. I would actually say project-based businesses become more interesting now because there's larger capacity boosts for things like estimation, quoting, RFPs, project management than they used to be before. Like a GC is like actually quite AI enabled. Your new constraint is now typically just going to be like boots on the ground for like supers. It's another interesting observation. So traditional diligence basically asks what the business is, right? And determines what the business is based on historical data. Obviously, and we can get into like different ways you can use diligence to, especially post LOI diligence, to actually create like an actual bidding process and records for businesses that may have the data but haven't put it together, or creating reporting and stuff for businesses that don't have it. You can now do that in diligence very, very quickly. However, I think the main thing I want to focus on here is that you need to buy based on the old and underwrite internally. So this concept of like what's the intrinsic value based on the new. And so you need to start looking at what workflows in the business are computer native that you can compress fastest, where AI can actually increase lead flow, conversion, or capacity quickly. And probably the most important question is whether you think the team and process base can support an AI-enabled operating model. We'll get into that a little bit more. So for diligence questions, you should be asking yourself, not asking the seller, but asking yourself. Like I said, which workflows already happen on a computer? Can the team adopt process? Will it resist structure? AI does not fix a broken culture. It amplifies and accelerates, a disciplined culture that's already in place. I would say, one of the things to look at here is also how comfortable office staff and managers are with computers, which is, generally not very. But if you find a company that is significantly more comfortable, like that's a much easier AI enablement project. It's not necessary, and you don't have to be like super technical. Like you don't have to be a developer. But I think confidence with a computer is the most important because, if I had to pick an adjective on like the person who becomes an AI operator in a business, it's not the most technical. It's the most playful, the most playful person, which requires confidence. And by playful, I mean like playful with their curiosity, playful in following loops, and not letting them go to close. How much of growth is limited by weak content or distribution? So the big thing here is that, again, because of the economics of producing and sending of content creation, distribution drop to zero. Customer and lead lists have insane value today, right? Just insane value. So if you find a 40-year-old business that has 35,000 customers, right? And what is the value of those customers? So like Kevin, just Kyle Plumbing, he just started using Chirp to do this. I hadn't talked to him about our systems, and he's already seeing 100K a month in revenue being generated from only 200 texts a day, and he's got a much larger. He wants to bring that to like 800, and I'm pretty sure if he started putting some of the systems we have in place, he'd probably see a 3x on that. And a lot of that was he lucked into basically buying a couple of tuck-ins that had massive customer lists. He didn't really realize at the time that was like the value that he was buying, but great that he did. So some of the upside signals outside of some of the things we already talked about, clear data and documented habits indicate like a teachable team. Just general organization, comfort with computers amongst office staff. Some red flags there would be chaotic data, no process discipline whatsoever. You could say that that's an opportunity, but it's also a risk, right? You certainly do not have any proof of people being able to integrate AI. Team fragility, so not taking on change well as a team. This is very hard to find in diligence, but it's just something to be aware of. Like this is an extra layer of change management that we're already adding to a large amount of change management. Again, my approach is being kind of to do it a little sneakily in the sense that you're teaching AI, but you're also doing all these other things that are part of change management, when it's really just an output the AI makes based on the inputs that the employees get by learning. So I think the decision rule here, as you look at companies and you're trying to apply this AI lens, is to buy when AI can accelerate a real operating foundation, and be careful when AI would only camouflage weak fundamentals. So why smaller deals may get more interesting. This also, by the way, applies to like the buy versus build equation, right? Build is a little bit more interesting with AI than it used to be. Obviously, build is very, very small. But it's quite easy to do today. Smaller deals are maybe the best of both worlds when smaller deals are actually bought at the right multiples, right? When I say the right multiples, I mean like 2x. So AI can disproportionately improve the economics of smaller acquisitions. The lower the base, the more meaningful certain operating lifts become in terms of relative percentage terms. So a few reasons for this. So shared services, typically shared services represent a higher percentage of OpEx on a smaller company than they do on, let's say, a mid-sized company. We don't typically buy like fully mature companies that have like fully mature management layers. So by doing that, by implementing AI, you can not only reduce OpEx in many cases, right? Remove the marketing agency spend, remove the finance fractional CFO spend, or even the controller spend, right? Potentially remove the office admin spend, right? But you can also do more with less. So you can remove those things and still do more and still do a lot of it yourself if you're disciplined. Incremental demand generation. So it's interesting. Almost every business has, I would say, like a certain amount of latent demand built in, right? Which is most businesses are not very good at, like of this size, are not very good at marketing. And so usually when you buy a business, there's enough latent demand to like support an extra tech day one, which is kind of an argument for one small argument for a smaller business. So the proportional lift is larger. But obviously, by implementing things like reach out to your customer list, because every business has a customer list, right? And by implementing a simple workflow on doing that, that could be enough to create, enough demand for 2 to 3 more techs just off the customer list. If a business only has 3 techs, right, and you're literally increasing demand at pretty much no extra cost, in order to potentially double the revenue, right? As long as the supply can keep up. So that even further pushes these businesses into like a supply constrained territory. And obviously because these businesses are also smaller and you're buying at 2x, I would say that getting 2x to 4x is quite reasonable. It's still, you still don't get the same level of arbitrage as buying something at like that 700 to a million EBITDA and sort of getting a 50% to 75% lift and then getting like a 2x multiple turn arbitrage by introducing it to a new buyer universe. But there's 100% a world where you buy a smaller business, you double it, right? You increase the gross profit by like 400K a year to literally double it, and then you do a tuck-in, or then you do it again, right? And then combine those two to get the same level of arbitrage lift. There's an argument, so it will take longer, but there's an argument that it is a significantly less risky way to try to get to the same outcome. One thing that I always talk about at workshops is this concept of the valley of death or the chasm or the swamp, right? But basically there's this concept of everyone understands that like finding product market fit is difficult in business. What a lot of people don't realize is that that's actually not what kills most businesses early on. It's actually this next stage, which is how do I get from owner operator to management run when I'm riding on thin margins, when I'm barely profitable, right? And usually, like historically, the answer has been work insane hours and or take a big risk on hiring someone with all your extra profit, right? And that's how people often got through it. And again, I think that this is the main reason a lot of people sell their businesses, right? Is that they either they never got through it or they never realized that they've gotten through it, and actually put in the extra effort to now hire and train and delegate. So AI can make this a lot easier, a lot faster. I would argue that AI is probably there's probably 2 solutions out of this. One is increase your prices and increase your unit economics, which may require ICP shuffling or revenue mix shuffling, and the other is implement AI. And I think those are the 2 ways to get out of the valley of death. If you want to create process, knowledge can be extracted into prompts, playbooks, and a business brain. Again, on the accountability side, follow-up reporting, first draft process work can all be offloaded to AI. And that immediately, those 2 things alone do the equivalent of hiring that like COO level integrator for most businesses. I still think that there's an argument to probably hire someone like a people and culture person just to take on some of the people, like personality management bullshit in a business, especially in a business that maybe doesn't have the professionalism in its culture to take care of it. But that's something AI can't do. So on the revenue side, as we mentioned, AI can, depending on the industry that you're in, can have a great effect. On the cost side, a lot of support functions move from headcount, right? So 5K, 7K a month headcount into software plus process, where the software is like API fees, and is in the order of $50 to $200 a month. Obviously, if you're able to do these things, if you're able to buy a business, compress the cost side, grow the revenue side 30%, compress the cost side another 30, 20%. You see this 50% lift. Your post close EBITDA multiple, if you actually do these things, looks significantly better. That being said, you're not buying based on that price. You're buying based on the 2.5x price listed in the previous 2 to 3 years of earnings, right? If you're able to do that, then that lift alone turns this into a 1 to 1.25x multiple post close, but don't buy based on that assumption, or don't underwrite in terms of value based on that assumption. There's enough deals for sale right now. There's enough lack of sophistication in buyers right now that you don't need to, right? Now's the time to get a deal. So what capability wins now? It's, to me, this is where like an operating system is really important. So if you're curious, some of you have probably already seen it. There's a YouTube video out there called Master Prompts, Build Your Master Prompt. If you search Master Prompt Hayden Miyamoto, you'll find it. Basically, like it was the intro to like, how do I give AI really good, strong context about my business going forward? And so what we do in our businesses is you have a company master prompt that has strong context with everything about your company. And then each individual has a role master prompt that gives AI very strong context about their role, right? What processes they're involved in, who they work for, who they report to, et cetera. And so every single time anyone in your company has a conversation with AI, you're inputting all of that context and getting very, very specific feedback, right? And so, for example, I used AI this morning to build this presentation. It took me about 30 seconds, right? And then maybe took me 5 minutes to look at it, or 10 minutes to look at it. It could do that because it knows what Acquira is, it knows who I am, it knows what Empower is, which is the business that does the AI side, it knows who the audience is, right? I don't need to give it that context. Had I done this with AI without any of that context, like in a brand new, ChatGPT session or account, it probably would have taken, even with AI, the better part of 1 to 2 hours to give it the right context, because that probably the initial drafts would be poor, and I'd have to also put time into editing it. So yeah, my approach has been interview and train the team directly. It's extract what the team already knows. So pulling knowledge from existing employees instead of relying on top-down documentation. Turn that into process maps. Turn that into knowledge documents that grow and become part of the master prompt. And then as you're going, you are training people to use AI, but you're also providing them with different prompts that basically create extra AI partners for them. And you're also training them on how to vibe code and prototype things, how to create reporting and accountability loops, how to delegate more effectively, how to get all of your reporting done automatically, right? Again, I see that as, the more I do this, I see that as projects that are done from the bottom up because people become AI enabled, as opposed to projects that go from the top down because you, the owner, are AI enabled. I started out top down and I became the bottleneck real fast, right? And you guys are going to be busy enough. So my plug, we do actually have, I have a company that does this now. Eventually, this is going to be the replacement of ACE. We do live cohorts. My main thing here is if you actually work inside a company where the company would be willing to pay for your training in order for you to do it on the company. I think that's a good investment for both you and the company. Take that, learn, and apply it to your own acquisition after the fact. But yeah, this has been one of the most fun projects I've worked on. If anyone's interested, empowerlabs.ai is that company. We'll chat with you. We'll give you a discount for being an Acquira customer. Yeah, so I'm going to open this up to Q&A now. I'm sure people have questions.
I have one, Hayden, and thank you for this great information as always. I'm wondering, just on broad overview, how these things might vary in a franchise context.
In terms of buying a franchise?
Yes, operating as well.
So the thing with franchise is, I'm assuming you mean like buying out an existing franchisee.
Correct.
Yeah. So the main issue would just be ensuring that you're not limited in what you can do. So one of the nice things about AI, for example, is that like the product, the go-to-market function is so collapsed. Like the go-to-market function is collapsed like 30x, right? If I want to create a new product now, it's 3 days, right? It's not 3 months. And so a lot of franchises will limit you on your ability to create new products or new offerings, and so that kind of sucks. Obviously, you're limited geographically as well. And so just looking at that, like it's really, really important to look at the franchise agreement and see where your limits are as an operator in a franchise. I'd say that's the larger, to me, that's the larger gate even than the royalty most of the time.
Okay, but the internal efficiencies, it sounds like they would probably still be available then?
I don't see why not. Yeah, it's
Okay.
not like, they're not going to limit you on an IT stack, I don't think.
Got it, yeah.
Kenneth, do you have a question? I believe he raised his hand.
Yes, I do. Well, actually two things. One is a comment, one is a question. So the comment is, if you're trying to build out processes and everything, and this is just a general resource for the group, we use a thing called Scribe at my company, and it works out great. It's super fast at building out all the processes, documentation thereof that Hayden's talking about. He may have a different resource. That's just one that we use at my company and we love. Secondarily, what does underwriting what does our internal underwriting actually look like using the tools that we have here at Acquira? So for instance, the new valuation calculator, the pro formas, etc. How would we incorporate these changes in this underwriting processes in like a more discrete in a more discrete format?
So I think that the point of this is that there's this window, let's call it 12 to 18 months. There's this window where you're underwriting and like the fundamental valuation of the business is based purely on historical non-AI numbers. And that's the only time we're going to see this. And so you should still base it on that, right? You should not overpay based on growth opportunities or what you think you can do to the business.
Right.
So that, but because of that, you might have found a business that was on the edge, right? That looked like it was, maybe it was like it was 3x, they weren't going to budge, and it was a smaller business. But then you found out that they had a list of 30,000 customers, right? And they don't market to the list, right? Or they market to the list once a year, or all they do is like wish them like a Merry Christmas, right? And that's all they do, which is super common. That to me is probably enough to be like, yeah, 3x still works, or I'm now comfortable with the DSCR of 1.6, right, on this business. I think the fundamentals though of your DSCR still needs to be above 1.6 in the first 2 years. I think that should still absolutely apply, because otherwise you're probably just overpaying.
Cool, because that is my exact situation that you just described. So
yeah.
Hayden, where are you seeing the biggest advantages on the B2B side?
That's in which process?
Yeah, so like, because if you look at some of these service companies, they're retail focused, right? Like they're
Mhm.
talking to customers. So one of the places that I've started to use is like newsletters and stuff like that. This is just automations from that perspective. But on the B2B side, those are more relationship driven, right? So on the BD function, on the partnership function, do you see, are you seeing where AI is making a difference?
The biggest one is you still need a sales function to support it, right? But the biggest one I think is outbound, like cold outbound, right?
Yeah.
Which you can't really do with B2C, right? I mean, not legally, but not without substantial risk. So, scraping listings, contacting them with personalized videos, super. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing we do B2B for like sourcing off-market businesses, right? So that entire workflow applies very well to B2B, and especially with certain types of businesses. So and again, a lot of it can come down to, there are plumbing businesses, but there's all sorts of different types of plumbing businesses and plumbing products and services, right? If you're a plumbing business that focuses on restaurants and does like, um, drain inspections and hydrojetting, like that's an easy one to create a list of every, mid-sized restaurant, right? And reach out
Yeah.
to them. And offer them a free inspection, right? Like that's the main thing. It's got to be something that actually grabs them, right? Outside of that, like I'd say like also B2B on the RFP side, like
Mm.
a lot of companies might not have done a lot of bidding or bidding of new work or use like bidding portals, for example, because it was just cost prohibitive. That can, again, depending on the company, that can go down quite a bit. Certain elements probably still need to be done manually. But I still think the cost collapse goes from, in many cases, 5 hours per bid to like, 30 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? I might pick on some people. Go for it, Kenneth.
Would you mind rehashing in a little bit more detail about how business owners can get out of that valley of death?
Yeah. So pre-AI, let me just re-explain. The valley of death is this concept of you're overworked, you're barely making enough to get out of your, I mean, in some cases, if you're an AE, you're barely making enough to get out of like your debt payments, right? Let alone like paying yourself well. You're basically, you have 4 hats and you are already working 60, 70 hours a week. So how do you delegate and offload the hats, right? So pre-AI, I actually think you need a win, and almost always the win is unit economics. And so the win with unit economics can be raise pricing uniformly, right? The win can be mix shift, right? So analyze the work that makes you money versus the work that doesn't make you money. So this is something we do in our first workshop, is we print out a good job versus a bad job from a gross margin perspective, and we'd analyze it together as a leadership team, right? That's literally, it's like one of the first things we do in our first ever leadership team workshop with companies, so that we can actually analyze, we're really good at data centers, right? Or we're really bad at large projects and really good at this small size project. So unit economics is the other one. In a post AI world, it adds in everything that was in this slide as efficiencies to take those hats off of you, right? So you're no longer delegating, you're replacing with automation. You still need to find the time to actually implement those things though, right? And so if you're already working 60 hours a week, there's still the challenge of how do I, make sure that I am able to implement, 10 hours a week in AI projects, right? So that's still something to be considered. The other advice I would give people in that situation is that you have to kind of get comfortable with letting fires, very slow burning fires burn, and very, and choose your time wisely, right? So it might be if I'm working 60 hours a week and, 15 of those hours are going towards a project that if I stop doing it, the company's not going to die, right? It may result in, slightly degraded quality. It may result in, slightly degraded revenue, for example. But that time is better spent on, like, let's say, AI initiatives.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining a little bit more about it. I appreciate it.
Yep. Aaron asks, specific to services such as HVAC and plumbing, will I elaborate on the structure of the smaller business that might be more interesting? Owner operator of 1 to 3 techs, something slightly larger. Yeah. I would say never under 3 techs, simply because the cost of key man risk is way too high, right? So if you have like 2 techs and 1 person quits, you like lose half your revenue, especially if you don't have the license and you're not able to do the work. So I'd say nothing under 3 techs. And I would say also that, revenue per tech is a really strong benchmark here. So I would love to have a business that has, I would much rather have a business that has 5 techs that makes 250 grand per tech, 1.25 top line, than a business that has, 3 techs but makes 1.5 million top line, right? Because the latter is something about that. It screams to me that they're doing some kind of specialist work that is like really increasing the key man risk involved. Whereas the former indicates that they probably just don't have enough demand, which is fairly easy to fix, or they're just like inefficient, right? And they're sending 2 people out to jobs, or so I'd say minimum 3 techs, no matter what you do. Revenue per tech. So my example was I would rather have a company that had 5 techs that were doing 250K in top line revenue per tech, versus a business that had 3 techs and was doing 500K in top line revenue per tech. So the benchmark for HVAC would probably be around that 500K number, where the gross profit margin is around 50 to 55%. Plumbing can range because there's so many different types of plumbing, right? There's like fix a clogged drain, and then there's like fix a a sewer issue. But even like Kevin's best plumbers are making like close to $1 million a year. And so in good markets, it's quite similar to HVAC, and in specialty work, it's higher. So one of our plumbing companies in Phoenix does a lot of specialty like underground work, and those guys, they bill like lawyers. It's like $750 an hour. Just because there's no competition that does it, right? A single job might have 2 bids, and you might come in, targeting a 70% margin. The other bid comes in targeting an 85% margin. Yes, Andy will share the slides, everyone here.
Hayden, is there a size, revenue size rule of thumb where the AI doesn't work as well, or it needs to be more complex?
Not a revenue size rule of thumb. No, I think it works for businesses regardless of size. Um, and I don't think there's any business that doesn't work on. There are just businesses, obviously the more that's done on a computer, or can be done on a computer, the more value there is. And I think that, again, if you're buying something on multiples years profit, then you want to be buying something that's, AI as for the industry isn't going to collapse the cost of massively, right? That's just something to be aware of. So again, I think home service is going to explode because of this. It's now becoming like college age kids are going to trade schools again because that's where they know they're probably still going to have jobs. Michael, Richard, Matt, Kyle, any questions? Got time for two more.
Hey, Hayden, how you doing, brother?
Hey, James.
Question for you. So I'm not in service, right? I haven't even been entertaining service businesses, right? Primarily because a lot of them are too small and the big ones are too expensive, right? So when you just kind of described smaller's more interesting with AI, and obviously, the office stuff. Aside from that, it just kind of I was like, that's actually, I can kind of look at these again. But I've been looking at e-commerce businesses, right? And I know you have a background in e-commerce and I have a background in e-commerce. How do you think AI is going to play out? Just your opinion, right? Like, how do you think AI is going to play out with e-commerce? Do you see any substantial risks there or primarily benefits like ad creation, ad management, reaching out to your customers, more personalized, cheaper software, right?
Yeah. So as long, I think it comes down to like, what is the product, right? Assuming you're doing like, let's say a physical commoditized product, I look at it quite similarly to service, right? It's the support services around it that have a cost collapse, right? Your marketing, your even your inventory prediction and control, right? Like all, which is a big part of e-commerce. Like all of those things become easier. So no, I don't see. Now, if you're selling a digital product, right?
Yeah, no.
That's totally different. But yeah.
So how do you think of kind of in the e-commerce space? I've looked at agencies, right? Do you think that they're going to get obliterated with AI, or what are your thoughts on that, right?
I think cost collapse will happen very quickly, right? There's going to be a race to the bottom.
And that's price collapse, right? So your cost collapses, but then also the price just kind of naturally.
Yeah. I mean price collapse for the end consumer.
Sure.
So yeah, I would predict, even if your exact service can't be done, a service that gets 80% of the outcome can be done scale and like very, very scaled and maybe a tenth of the cost. And so, and a lot of small businesses will kind of go to that. Again, it depends. If you're working with larger businesses as a customer, who are willing to pay a premium, if a lot of it is based on the relationship, maybe those have longer. I still think they'll probably collapse in terms of price, but they might have a little longer. Just because they're entrenched.
Yeah. So you think like an e-commerce business with a physical product and established kind of customer base, right? Let's say it's been around 20 years, for example, just a lot of brand equity. Does that look, I mean, I imagine it just looks better, right? So you can kind of underwrite it the same way you described, right? In your, because you're going to be collapsing a lot of your software, payroll, a lot of the overhead that you just kind of have as an e-commerce business, right? But maybe your ads increase. That's typically where it goes. Like if your margin increases, then people just pay more for their ads. So then the auction competition increases. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just thinking like I don't want to buy an e-commerce business and then websites go away. I don't know. I just was thinking your thoughts there, right? Like, do people stop going to websites and all of a sudden it's like you're buying via chatbot? I mean, I know that's probably far in the future, if ever, right?
Yeah, I mean anything e-commerce that isn't fully like platform dependent, like not an FBA business. Most of those businesses are based on like arbitraging the platforms themselves and being good at that, at identifying and quickly executing on those arbitrage opportunities compared to competitors. So, chat GPT shopping is an opportunity, right? For
Sure.
e-commerce owners, right? You know, GEO or AGO or whatever you want to call it is an opportunity for people who can figure out how to create really strong, Reddit bots.
AI presence, yeah.
Yeah, to get AI presence in the LLMs. So if that's your strength, then play your strength. And again, AI can teach you that, so that can now become everybody's strength. Everyone who becomes very AI enabled. That's another thing to be aware of. The way to learn new capabilities today is no longer to hire an expensive consultant who's done it before. It's to ask AI to like build out the process for you step by step.
Right. Yeah, you're right. So it lowers the barrier essentially for competitors to enter. So maybe the people who are already kind of established, that is the appeal, right? Because if anybody can do it, if you have a strong, yeah, okay, I appreciate it, man. I just was curious on your thoughts. I know you had a background in, agency work and web stuff.
Hey, Hayden, quick question for you with what you just actually mentioned, because I've gone back and forth on, when you said the consultant, bringing that in, not necessarily you go through leverage the LLMs today, but to me, judgment still is really important, and still having these certain functional leaders, I think is how I look at it, are still key, because the AI can often tell you the thing to do that might not be the thing to do because it doesn't actually have the experience. So where do you find that dance? Like, when is it right to leverage one versus the other?
So, this equation, U to the power of AI, people ignore the importance of the U part of that equation, right? And so, and that's where taste is. So 100% agree. One thing I would say is, like, the more context you give AI and the better context you give AI, the less hallucination and bad advice happens. So that is something that to be aware of, like, and that can improve drastically. That being said, the people you want to keep are going to be the high taste, high judgment, and AI native people. That's a hard combination.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you, and hello.
Hello. Have you bought a business? We haven't spoken in a long time.
Not yet. What I'm doing now is I've started consulting in a business where that's coming with some equity share, but I've been stubborn with my space out in my area where I live, and that's biting me. So for the next, I don't know. I'm still searching. I've just got to decide if I'm going to move somewhere else. I just don't want to. So I've started to outreach more, starting to have more, like, with everything from CPEAs to some of the local business organizations. I'm just trying to play up the more chips and trying to see if this could help at all more. And back to what you said, and I actually appreciate hearing it, because I've really been giving a lot more consideration to these smaller businesses of recent, because every business I've looked at over here that's been within at least my buy box, they weren't great businesses, or they were highly overvalued, and someone still came in and paid for those. But I have been considering getting a few smaller businesses and basically pulling those together. And I like what you're saying, with how it makes the numbers look a little more, make them work better.
Yep. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that pretty much everybody in the world should be making it their priority to become extremely good with AI today. Like, it's that important.
Totally.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. Andy will share the slides with everyone here. Take care.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.